Let us pray. Loving and gracious God, we give you thanks for all the gifts that you have bestowed on us, especially for those people who have made this day possible. Energetic and committed students, generous parents and benefactors, and devoted faculty, staff, and administrators. Guide us with your wisdom and strengthen us in your service and the service of all your people. We ask this through Jesus, our risen Lord, who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, one God forever and ever. Amen. Please be seated. As Chancellor of St. John's University, on behalf of the sponsoring Benedictine Monastery, and in the name of the Board of Regents, I herewith call into session this commencement convocation at the conclusion of our 150th year of the conferring of academic degrees granted by the university. And I request Brother Dietrich Reinhardt, President of the university, to take charge of these exercises.
This is a day of glad and joyful celebration. St. John's University has kept this day each spring since its founding before the Civil War. At commencement, we call to mind the core purpose of this university, the cultivation of the intellect through study of the liberal arts and graduate theological disciplines. The cultivation of the intellect within a distinct experience of community, which draws on the deepest well springs of human culture, fosters understanding of human interdependence, and calls forth full, integrated lives of faith and reason, action and love. On this joyful day, you, the class of 2007, enter into a long stream of St. John's graduates who gathered together one last time to celebrate how their lives had been enlarged by what they had learned here, by the teaching and mentoring of professors known by their first name, by the cultivation of friendship and solitude, prayer and service, by the sheer beauty of this place and its power to anchor a whole life's journey. The great writer Eudora Welty closed her autobiography, One Writer's Beginnings, with this short sentence: "All serious daring comes from within." All serious daring comes from within. From its founding, St. John's has sought to foster connections between what students study and the fundamental deep purpose of their lives. Undergraduate liberal arts education and graduate theological study each wrestle with fundamental issues, ones that the venerable St. John's monk, professor, and dean Father Virgil Michael claimed are never settled, that enter into the very foundation of our existence, reach into the very structure of human society, and into the relations of persons to God. Father Virgil, who died in 1939, thought that ultimately real education must be self-propelled and self-impelled to the greatest extent possible. Partly because the subject matter demands it. You have to reckon with it yourself. But ultimately, because the measure of what has been learned is found within and expresses itself in lives that stretch beyond the reach of classmates, teachers, and mentors. We join together now in a ritual that places us outside of time a bit so we can concentrate our minds on this group of remarkable graduates who are embarked upon a trajectory greater than any of us can imagine. Persons whom we regard today with full and joyful hearts because of the achievements of learning and personal growth that everybody can see. Persons ready to move into the future. Beloved persons who will achieve more than they ever imagine because they are borne up at every turn by family and friends, communities, associations, and churches, each of them an arena in which the weakest and the most vulnerable reveals the face of God. The ritual of commencement brings before us for a brief moment the habits of mind, the capacity for wonder, the inbreaking of truth, which result from the great amiable conversation of ideas, which is at the heart of this Catholic and Benedictine liberal arts community. You know, scarcely any of us will remember much at all about this event down the road, but it will live on deep within to sustain the fundamental truths of our lives. For all serious daring comes from within. It is fitting that we enter into the heart of this commencement with the address by a member of the class of 2007 who has been selected by his classmates. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Paul Storm.
Sorry, I'm really nervous. Okay, I'll leave that open. All right, I guess before I begin, there's a small confession that I have to make. For about the last 2 weeks or so, most of you have come up to me and asked me if I had a speech written, and you would ask me if I knew what I was going to talk about. I told you that I did. That was a lie. Sorry about that. I guess kind of in the true spirit of college, I did what many of us have done, and I waited until the absolute last moment to write something for today. But really, I had to go first to Bubba, the Brother Willie's pub manager, and one of the pitchers on the St. John's baseball team. And I had to ask him, Bubba, what would you like to hear about on this last day that we spend as undergraduates? And Bubba thought for a moment, and he said to me, Storm, I honestly can't tell you what to say. You have to find those words, and you're going to find them right here. Thanks, Bubba. That wasn't a lot of help, but... Okay, so far so good. We're doing good. All right. Class of 2007. Think back to the day that you arrived here in August of 2003. I, for one, was terrified. I knew no one, was moving into a strange building, and sharing a tiny dorm room with a roommate I had only spoken to once prior to that day. I just didn't feel ready for this thing that we call college. Most importantly, because I still hadn't seen the movie Animal House. Like you, dear friends, I was an apprentice to the world of adulthood, standing at the threshold which divides dependency from self-sufficiency. I wanted desperately to back up and wait a moment before stepping into my new home on Tommy 2, but that wasn't an option. After saying goodbye to my parents and watching them drive away, I sat behind Peter Engel and reflected on the words of Paulo Coelho. Those of you who know me aren't surprised that I would do something like that. Those of you who don't, I'm a big nerd who does things like that. But Paulo wrote, "Life sets us a challenge to test our courage and willingness to change. At such a moment, there is no point in pretending that nothing has happened or in saying that we are not ready. For the challenge will not wait, and life does not look back." Take a moment to live in those words, my friends, because today we are not so different from yesterday or last week, but the challenge that we face is undeniably new. Today, something happens regardless of how ready we feel. A moment that uncertain youth like us must face in every culture and country has just begun. In ancient Greece, the young men desiring citizenship's obligations and privileges underwent a rite known as dokimasia. To prove their worth and capacity to be good citizens, they were subjected to a grueling public questioning, covering everything from personal accomplishments to strength of character. The Shan people of Thailand call their rite Poi Sang Long. In that culture, young men take novice monastic vows and spend a period of time lasting anywhere from 1 week to several years in the monasteries of northern Thailand, living by the values which bond those holy men. And here, in Collegeville, Minnesota, we've endured our own set of challenges. We fought biblical swarms of Asian lady beetles that infested our first-year dormitories. In 2005, we suffered the Noro plague that claimed dozens of hours from us and inspired some extremely hilarious t-shirts. During our junior year, we returned to our primal roots when a blackout took place. And let's not forget the many raging fires that we have survived. The garage at the Breeze, Vincent 91, next to Mary Hall, in the Sexton dumpsters, in the Seton dumpsters, in the Seton dumpsters again, in the Seton dumpsters again, then the Vincent dumpsters were struck, and most recently, my beloved recliner, which fell victim to arson at approximately 3:23 on Friday, May 4th, 2007. Recliner, you are deeply missed, and I hope that you are alongside AJ Sai's Isuzu Rodeo wherever incinerated possessions go. Class of 2007, within each of these rites is the demand for courage. Courage to undergo scrutiny, courage to leave home, and courage to endure pain. But there is also great rewards inherent in such trials. The rites of passage in every society communicate to their members that the youth who successfully complete them are independent adults, ready to accept full responsibility for their own lives. We participate today in the rite of passage by which we are released from this life of preparation into that life for which we are now as prepared as anyone ever is. This means that Noah Foss will now need to start waking up on time on his own. Luke Hellier is one step closer to controlling the state of Minnesota. Matt Quinn will be released onto the world, whether it's ready for him or not. And Brian Thompson will probably be sending out wedding invitations very soon. That is a B-Rye. That is a Hugh. Inside joke, I'm sorry. Today, we join 150 years of St. John's University alumni. We join Father Don Talafis' mass email list and the database of phone numbers called for donations to St. John's University. So future philanthropists, remember that we are also leaving a community of artisans, scholars, priests, athletes, poets, aspiring actors, entrepreneurs, and friends to either move back into the comfort of our parents' basements or to get tiny apartments paid for by jobs that some of us never expected to even apply for. Knowledge of these realities leave many of us unsure how to feel. Some of us are elated that this day has finally come. Some are sad that 4 years have passed so quickly. And then there's a group of us who cannot place exactly what emotion has been triggered, but all of us recognize a feeling of unity today, a oneness, a connection that is rare but unmistakable. In Japanese folklore, there is a story of an old woman whose sons did not understand the importance of unity. To illustrate its value, she gave each son a stick and instructed him to break it over his leg. She then bundled 3 sticks together, handed them to the strongest of her sons, and asked him to break it. When he failed, the old mother said, "You see, my sons, no one of you is strong enough alone. but together, you cannot be broken. Over the last 4 years, we have developed bonds and friendships strong enough to protect us from the pressures of university life. But now the challenge set before us by this common experience called life demands more. In a world of almost 7 billion people, singular sticks break too easily. As graduates of this institution, we must work together. Fortunately, we join a bundle 25,000 graduates strong, spread onto every continent. So as we receive our degrees today, remember that we are receiving more than a sheet of paper, more than a university seal, and more than the culmination of our university experience. Class of 2007, we are receiving a great challenge to move this world toward a more peaceful existence. As undergraduates, the Pine Curtain shielded us from the world's more negative characteristics. As graduates, we are on the offensive. And our job, my friends, is to spread the code of ethics that we have lived by as Johnnies. Accomplishing that task will not be easy. Many generations before us have tried. Undoubtedly, many more will follow us before it is realized. But we can improve this world. So today, I ask you to stay deeply interested in every moment of your life. Be passionate about every Monday, every weekend, and every evening that you spend at home with your families. Pay attention to the miracle of life and the capacity that you have to influence it. During this last month, I have seen you create some of the greatest memories that you will take from this place. Continue to live with that absolute devotion to existence. There are horrific reminders all around us of the transience of each individual life when the miracle is forgotten. In Iraq, hundreds of men, women, and children die every day because fear and misunderstanding have distracted the world from peaceful solutions. In Virginia, hundreds mourn the loss of sons and daughters. And across the world, significant climatic shifts raise questions about the future of our own species. As Johnnies, we know these events are not as separate as they may seem. The root of so much of the world's suffering is the failure by individuals to recognize how closely linked every human life is. But here, at this place, we have learned that distance, numbers, and cultural differences do not insulate us from one another. We are all human, and we are all hoping for a brighter tomorrow. But instead of hoping, I ask you to engage in creation. Make every day better than its predecessor. So class of 2007, if you have received any wisdom or insight from my words, please know that they are a reflection of what you have taught me. You are greater than anyone will ever be able to tell you, because language can rarely capture the beauty of actions like those you have performed here. Take pride in yourselves, Johnnies, for you deserve nothing less. Nick Busker, Adam Nelson, Ryan Flegel, Mike McKeever, Sam Cable, Donut, Hawk, B-Rye, Hoban, Ducky, and Ash Morse, I want to thank each of you. Having you as roommates has made me into the man that I am. So thank you for everything that you've done. Mom and Dad, those are the names of the culprits responsible for my corruption. I just have 3 very short things left to do, I promise. Number 1, Jeff Caldwell. Because it's Mother's Day and we're in a church, I cannot say what you suggested, but you know what I'm referring to. Andy Warmouth, as promised, you, sir, are the greatest human being in this room. Not really, but he asked me to say that. And now, I need a conclusion. Something that you won't be able to call cliche or overtly passé. And with a couple of rhyming words, I've just wandered out of prose and into the poetry that those of you who know me aren't surprised that I switched to so quickly. Like a jack-in-the-box whose tunes run out, the spring's been sprung, and there's no going back from what I've just done to your 2007 graduation. So just want to give you have something to you that'll fill all this air with the sounds of satisfaction. I'm talking about hoops and hollers and applause, the things that create the sort of energy on which my spirit draws. So with pen tip under precise grip, I release this torrent of language I call my Frankenstyle. It's a beast unleashed on a captivated audience to raise you from your seats and add a bit of beat to the rhythm that I've given. Congratulations, graduates.
Ambassador John W. MacDonald, lawyer, diplomat, longtime international civil servant, development expert, and peace builder, is co-founder and chairman of the Institute for Multi-Track Diplomacy in Washington, D.C., established in 1992. Through the Institute, Ambassador MacDonald and his colleagues have been instrumental in defining and applying the concept of multi-track diplomacy, which treats the process of international peacemaking as a living system, a web of interconnected activities, individuals, institutions, and communities operating together to create peace. The Institute is currently at work in Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, providing negotiation support, conflict resolution workshops, and training and education in diplomatic and governmental skills to communities dealing with ethnic or international conflict. Ambassador MacDonald's journey to multi-track diplomacy began in the world of single-track or government-to-government diplomacy as a member of the United States Foreign Service with assignments in Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. He has served as Deputy Director General of the United Nations International Labor Organization and has carried out a wide variety of assignments from the U.S. State Department in the area of multilateral diplomacy. He was appointed ambassador twice each by Presidents Carter and Reagan to represent the United States at various UN World Conferences. After retiring from the Foreign Service in 1987, he went on to hold several professorial, teaching, and lecturing positions at major graduate and undergraduate institutions, as well as the Foreign Service Institute, the Center for the Study of Foreign Affairs, and the Iowa Peace Institute, which he headed as president from 1988 to 1992. The ambassador holds bachelor's and JD degrees from the University of Illinois and is a graduate of the National War College. He has written or edited 8 books on negotiation and conflict resolution. And now for the rest of the story. In the late 1990s, Ambassador MacDonald met the chair of the St. John's Board of Regents, Dan Whalen, class of 1969. According to Dan, that meeting forever changed his life. It also changed St. John's University. At the ambassador's suggestion, Dan visited war-torn Bosnia-Herzegovina and became committed to help rebuild that war-torn land. As some of you know, one aspect of that commitment has been to provide scholarships, allowing young Bosnian men and women active in a program called Peace Trails to attend St. John's and the College of St. Benedict. The class of 2007 includes 7 Johnnies and Bennies from Bosnia, and they stand in a cohort that by its completion will include over 40 graduates of our 2 schools. These students have enriched our campuses beyond measure, and their presence at the heart of our campuses owes not a little to the capacity of this generous man to enlist unlikely partners in projects of great human importance. We are indebted to Ambassador MacDonald for his enduring optimism and untiring efforts to help people in conflict find common ground. We applaud his inspirational and unwavering commitment to teaching peace and creating peace the world over. And so the citation reads, "You have devoted your life to the conviction that peace is always possible. As a lawyer, diplomat, and international civil servant, you learned to bring people together to build new agreements and to rebuild broken ones. Whether your goal was the delivery of aid to Europe and Japan after the devastation of World War II, or the management of a 3,200-person staff from 102 countries for the International Labor Organization, you became adept at connecting governments and people to further the common good. You distilled the wisdom gained from 40 years on the front lines of international diplomacy into a second career as professor, writer, and international peace negotiator, ultimately co-founding the Institute for Multi-Track Diplomacy, where you now serve as chairman. You offer the world a team of experienced negotiators practicing a systematic approach to peacemaking. You are invited by communities riven by ethnic conflict the world over, from Bosnia to Zimbabwe to Kashmir. You come to their tables, you listen, and you help them lay down their weapons and hear each other. Appointed ambassador 4 times by Presidents Carter and Reagan, nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize in 1994, you teach us that if we would be peacemakers, we must offer not only gifts of experience, knowledge, and resources, but also our hearts, filled with unquenchable hope. For this, St. John's University recognizes you with gratitude and confers upon you Ambassador John W. McDonald, the Doctor of Laws, honoris causa, on this 13th day of May, 2007.
Thank you very much, Brother Dietrich, for those wonderful words. I hope that I have earned them, but it's been a great journey, I must confess. You'll be interested to know that our institute in Washington, D.C., since 1992, has had over 200 interns from 43 countries, all getting their master's or PhDs in conflict resolution. And as you enter a graduate program in that field, I encourage you to think about us. I am deeply honored by this wonderful occasion. I just want to thank everyone here. I want to pay particular respect to the 7 graduates from Bosnia. They have overcome enormous difficulties throughout their life to be here and to graduate on this day. And their parents who are with them are very, very proud parents, and I want to congratulate them on this occasion. Will you join me in welcoming them to this? I want to leave 2 thoughts with you. When I lecture to young Foreign Service officers who are going out into the world, I tell them that you have to understand today how the world perceives you, not how you perceive the world. And I tell them that the world perceives you today as the most arrogant people in the world, as the poorest listeners in the world, and as the most impatient people in the world. And I said, you put those 3 together, you don't make a very good diplomat. But I tell them you have it within your power to change all of those things. You can learn to be less arrogant. You can learn how to listen. And you can learn how to be patient. And that's the message that I pass on to you. My last thought has to do with the area that we've been working in for so many years, and that's the area of conflict resolution. And I want you to know, and I want you to remember this, that there's only one way that you can reduce conflict in the world and in your life. There's only one way, and that is to sit down and listen to each other face to face. Until you do that, you'll never solve a conflict at any level of society, with your family or the nation or globally, internationally. Thank you very much, and God bless.
Perhaps most of us have seen those bumper stickers that read, "Start seeing motorcycles." Well, in 1997, when PBS's Religion and Ethics News Weekly went on the air, Bob Abernathy's new bumper sticker read, "Start Seeing Religion." A veteran television correspondent with a long-time interest in religion, Mr. Abernathy developed and created the show in response to deep criticism of American television's lack of attention to religious news. Now in its 10th season, with Mr. Abernathy as executive editor and host, this half-hour news magazine has been widely praised by critics and has won numerous awards for its thoughtful public exploration of religion, ethics, and spirituality in American life and throughout the world. It airs on more than 250 public stations nationwide. It reaches not only the general public, but is also eagerly used as a teaching aid. And in this internet age, its impact goes far beyond television. The Religion Ethics News Weekly website is one of the biggest religion sites in the world, with close to 500,000 visitors each month. It has been nominated this year for a Webby Award, which is something like the internet equivalent of an Oscar. Before launching Religion Ethics News Weekly, Mr. Abernathy served as a correspondent for NBC News for more than 4 decades, reporting from across the nation and around the world, including Moscow, where he covered the end of the Cold War and the collapse of communism and the Soviet Union. He received bachelor's and master's degrees from the Woodrow Wilson School of Public and International Affairs at Princeton University, and has also studied theology and social ethics at Yale. In 2003, Mr. Abernathy received the Distinction in Ministry Award from the Alumni Association of the Yale Divinity School. Bob Abernathy's appearance on campus today is actually a repeat performance. We had the honor to host him here in 2003 when he moderated for Twin Cities Public Television an interfaith discussion on evangelical Christianity in America that originated in St. John's own Pellegrin Auditorium. From its founding 150 years ago, St. John's has been committed to enlarging faith, hope, and love, seeking to weave them into ever more powerful interactions for the sake of human community and this beloved earth. We recognize in Bob Abernathy a signature effort to do just that on a far larger scale. And so it is a great honor for us to recognize a person whose life's work inspires us at every turn. Bob, welcome back. Will you please come forward? You showed us something we were missing. You put a new picture in front of us when you launched Religion and Ethics News Weekly 10 years ago. For the first time, our nation began seeing regular coverage of religion and spirituality in America in all its diversity on television. Your deep personal interest in religion, combined with 4 decades of experience as a correspondent for NBC News, reporting from Washington, Los Angeles, London, and Moscow, preparing you well for this venture into a new kind of television show. We have come to depend on that picture for its thoughtful and insightful exploration of the full range of our country's dynamic religious culture. Each week, into our living rooms come Americans of every background to share their spiritual and ethical perspectives. Preachers from the pulpits of New Orleans searching for the Easter message amidst the continuing aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. Tourists of all ages spending vacations with AIDS orphans in places no one wants to go. Muslim, Christian, and Jewish women learning how to know each other better by discussing books together. We applaud the many awards your show has garnered and the honors that crowd your resume. Nowhere else in television can we find such diligent reporting on religion and such a balanced presentation of the profound moral issues facing our nation. For this, St. John's University recognizes you with gratitude and confers upon you, Bob Abernathy, the Doctor of Humane Letters, honoris causa, on this 13th day of May, 2007.
Well, thank you very much. Anybody who knows anything about television production knows that it's not a one-man band. There should be about 30 of these hoods and this wonderful citation for all the people who have made it possible. It's a great honor to receive this degree, to have been asked to be your speaker. I thank Brother Dietrich for his kind invitation and generous words. I want to congratulate all you graduates, all you parents and other family members, everyone in the faculty, administration, staff. Yours is a great joint achievement, and I'm especially pleased to celebrate it with you at this 150th St. John's graduation. Also, to all you mothers here, happy Mother's Day. I also want to congratulate St. John's and my friend Fred DeSam Lazaro for deciding that the two of you could work together on a project no one I know could do better than Fred, studying undercovered stories all over the world. Fred has made that his top priority and in Africa, in Asia, and he has done so with such distinction. He's become a great asset not only to public television, but for the country as a whole. He is also that man above all others whose frequent flyer miles I most covet. It's a particular pleasure to be once again on this campus, this peaceful sanctuary, and to be in the good company of Benedictines. I appreciate your generous hospitality. I remember a time long ago when I was also in distinguished company. It was in the mid-1980s when the Catholic bishops put out thoughtful pastoral letters on such great issues as the morality of nuclear war and the need for economic justice. One year I was away from Washington, where the bishops were meeting, but I wanted to cover what they were doing, and NBC agreed that I could do that. So my wife and I came back and got a room at the conference hotel, which was all but filled with the several hundred bishops. The first morning, we ordered breakfast from room service, and the waiter arrived while Mary was still in bed and I was not yet dressed. It turns out that it is hard for a waiter to see a middle-aged, then gray-haired man in his shorts and discern whether he is a reporter or a bishop. The poor waiter looked at the obviously female form in bed and was so embarrassed he could not look at me. He just handed me the bill, took it back as soon as I signed it, mumbled, "Thank you, Father," and fled. Anticipating this day, I've been thinking about the choices that come with graduation. It's one of the great ironies of being in your early 20s that you're supposed to decide the kind of work you want to do, surely one of the most important decisions you ever make, at a time when you know only a little bit about the enormous variety of possible careers. At least that's the way I remember it. I brooded, as you may have too, over how I could find a combination of what I might be good at, where I might earn a living, and how I might be useful in the world. I found a lot of that in reporting, especially recently. Religion and Ethics News Weekly has provided a wonderful combination of those considerations. Indeed, it's the most satisfying work I've ever done. And one reason for that is the opportunity it gives me to seek out men and women who are interesting, deeply insightful, and typically eloquent, and talk to them about the things that matter most. I've discovered that people of great wisdom are not only the prophets and saints of long ago, but men and women very much alive today. I want to pass on to you a few of the things some of those people have said to me and to other Religion and Ethics News Weekly reporters. Perhaps there will be an idea or a phrase that will resonate with you as you think both about what you want to do next and about the kind of life you want to lead. Last year, I sat down with the novelist and memoirist Frederick Buechner. He's an ordained Presbyterian minister, and the great issues of belief are strong underpinnings of all his writing. I asked Buechner what he tells people about choosing a career, and he said this: find the place where your own deepest gladness intersects with the world's greatest needs. Both those conditions. The late authority on myths, Joseph Campbell, is well known for his advice, follow your bliss. But Buechner goes further, connecting the gladness, what makes you most deeply happy, with the idea of service to those around you, the world's needs. And that seems right to me. Buechner is also well known for his advice, listen to your life, by which he means look back at patterns that might give you a hint of where you're being led. Buechner calls it paying attention, noticing when the transcendent, by whatever name you call it, is trying to break into your life. In my everyday work in Washington, I'm part of a largely secular world, so it has been an astonishing joy to hear those I have interviewed discuss their own faith as naturally as the rest of us might talk about baseball or the weather. Across the spectrum, from those who say they are spiritual but not religious to the most traditionally religious, these people seem to have in common the intuition that beyond everything we can see and touch and measure, the material world, there is a spiritual dimension. And, excuse me, what many of them referred to as the something more. They often described living in both worlds at the same time. For instance, there's a writer and editor in Tennessee with the wonderful name of Phyllis Tickle. She's been keeping the divine hours like a monastic for 30 years. Every 3 hours, an alarm goes off on her wristwatch, and she stops whatever she's doing to read the Psalms appointed for that day and hour. Sorry. She told me her habit is now so ingrained she can be in a meeting talking and praying at the same time. Another person I interviewed was Francis Collins, the leader of the Human Genome Project, which unlocked the genetic code. He is a born-again Christian evangelical, and he spoke of his double joy as both a scientist and a believer when he discovered, as he put it, what no one had known before but God. Another of our reporters spoke with Anne Lamott, the writer in Northern California, whose trademarks are her dreadlocks, her wit, irreverence, and the rough life she lived when she was young until at age 30, she was converted to Christianity. She says, against all her wishes. Now she writes with great honesty about living a religious life. She told our reporter, I don't find spiritual insight thinking thinky thoughts. I find God in the utter dailiness and mess of it all, a very incarnational view. Lamott also called laughter carbonated holiness. One person I wanted particularly to meet is the writer Madeleine L'Engle. Maybe long ago you read A Wrinkle in Time or some of her other books. They don't preach, but they do affirm. I went to see Mrs. L'Engle in her spacious apartment on New York's Upper West Side. She told me about a family discussion once that she and her children and grandchildren had had at dinner about whether the universe is friendly or meaningless. Madeline's granddaughter, Lena, had heard the discussion, and afterwards, as Madeline was putting her to bed, in Madeline's words, she just looked at me cosmically and said, "Gran, is it all right?" Madeline said, "She meant the whole thing. Is it all right?" Ms. Lingle went on, "I swallowed my heart and my everything, and I said, 'Yes, Lena, it's all right.'" In Milford, Michigan, I found Thomas Lynch, who is both a poet and the town's most prominent undertaker. Lynch begins the day in informal clothes, writing, while he listens to Irish music by shortwave from Ireland. Then he puts on his dark suit and his Homburg and walks across the street to his other job. Lynch says poetry and funerals have in common the attempt to say something about the unspeakable. Also, like many others, Lynch acknowledged his theological doubts. He said the worst times for him are when he has to bury a child, and he wonders then whether God exists at all. I asked him on such days, "What do you do?" Lynch burst out laughing, and he said, "I pray." He also observed, poet that he is, that grief is the tax we pay on loving people. A few years ago, I talked with the late Reverend William Sloane Coffin, then living out his days in a little village in Vermont. 2 strokes had slurred his speech, but his words and faith were as powerful as ever. Coffin had been an activist in the civil rights and anti-Vietnam War movements, and there was plenty left in him of what he called his lover's quarrel with his country. He spoke of the tears and blood of the innocent all over the world, and he said, "It's not God's doing, it's our doing. That's human malpractice. Every time people lift their eyes to heaven and say when they see the innocent suffering, 'God, how could you let this happen?' it is well to remember that at that exact moment, God is asking exactly that same question of us. How could you let it happen?" Coffin insisted that social justice is at the heart of the Gospels. He also said, "God is not too hard to believe in, he is too good to believe in, we being such strangers to such goodness." Coffin continued, "The love of God is to me absolutely overwhelming." And then he quoted an early church father, Irenaeus, as having said, "The glory of God is a human being fully alive." I cannot say how representative Coffin and the others are of America as a whole, but I can assure you people like these are all around us. They are not separated from the kinds of lives most of us lead. They are not dour or conspicuously pious. They are what you might call spiritual realists who look the world squarely in the eye and see its joy and its beauty, yes, but also its suffering and disappointment. Yet they do not despair. They are both tough-minded and hopeful. They live successfully in the material world and also remain solidly grounded in the spiritual, affirming and celebrating their conviction that there is something more and that they can communicate with it and experience its presence. They are brave, they pray, and they like to laugh. I came away from all these interviews thinking it was not exceptional, but normal to live in these 2 realms at once, the material and the spiritual. My interview friends would recommend to you, I think, that you identify your deepest gladness and use it to assault human malpractice. They would approve of listening for God's presence in the midst of the utter dailiness and mess of it all. And they would want all of us to assure Lena that at bottom, at the end of the day, it's all right. Getting to know these people, these old souls, has made me want to be like them, if I can, to see the world as they do. I hope hearing some of their words will have the same effect on you and help you be, as they are, fully alive. I congratulate you again, and I wish you Godspeed on your journeys.
The Pax Christi Award is the highest honor given by St. John's Abbey and University, and it is given to individuals who have distinguished themselves by lives that exemplify the ideals of Saint Benedict. Born in England, educated in London and Rome, Archbishop Michael Louis Fitzgerald has devoted his life as a member of the Missionaries of Africa to the pastoral care of Christians in North Africa and to the cause of interreligious dialogue worldwide. He has steeped himself in the languages and history of another continent and entered personally into its challenges. As an emissary of the Vatican, he has labored unceasingly to build greater understanding between the Christian and the Muslim peoples of the Arab world. The Latin words Pax Christi mean peace of Christ. We recognize in Archbishop Fitzgerald a man of faith who has made the peace of Christ living and real for all seekers. We rejoice today in the gifts of the Holy Spirit that he has shared so generously. Archbishop Fitzgerald, will you please stand? Archbishop Fitzgerald, we honor you for leading the way across the challenging terrain of Muslim-Christian relations. You have blazed a trail toward greater understanding between our two religions that will ease the journey for all who come after you. You began your preparation for this work as a member of the Society of Missionaries of Africa. Sent to do seminary studies in Carthage, Tunisia in the late 1950s, you began learning Arabic to fit you for a future on the African continent. And it was there that your interest in Islam took root. After further study in Rome and London, you became a member of the Missionary of Africa Society's General Council and staffed their Pontifical Institute for Arabic Studies in Tunisia. For 2 decades, you held both pastoral and teaching assignments in several African countries, including Uganda, during the reign of dictator Idi Amin, and Sudan. Not only did you minister and teach, you listened and learned. In Sudan, where you preached the gospel to a small Christian community, you also began a dialogue with Muslims of that country. From 1986 to 2006, as 4th Secretary and later 5th President of the Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue, you created an environment in which religious partnerships between Christians and Muslims began to bud and flower. From Jordan and Iran to Egypt and beyond, you nurtured an impressive list of Muslim-Christian dialogues, colloquia, and conversations that yielded papers, publications, and pioneering agreements. Under your aegis, the labors of the first 2 decades after Vatican II for ongoing contacts and dialogues between Catholic and Muslim international leaders were brought to real and tangible fruition. You are widely considered the most well-informed and capable scholar working on Christian-Islamic relations in the senior leadership of the Church today. In addition, you are described by friends and colleagues alike as gracious, hardworking, approachable, and pastoral. In your current position as Apostolic Nuncio to Egypt and the Vatican's delegate to the League of Arab States, you bring this powerful combination of attributes and skills to a region that is critical to Middle East peace, marked by frequent political unrest and often hostile to Copts and other Christian minorities. There could be no better match for this sensitive assignment. In this first decade of the 21st century, while the tide of religious misunderstanding and conflict continues to rise in so many parts of the world, you stand both firmly rooted in your Catholic faith and fully committed to dialogue with those of other religions. You teach us that it is possible to reach out. You show us a way across the divide. You are able to see a future in which peaceful religious relations with our Muslim brothers and sisters are possible. For this clear sight in a world so often blind, we esteem you and gratefully present you, Most Reverend Michael Louis Fitzgerald, Archbishop and Apostolic Nuncio to Egypt, with our highest honor, the Pax Christi Award, on this, the 13th day of May, 2007, in omnibus glorificetur Deus.
لازم أن أقول شكراً جزيلاً. Very many thanks. I'm immensely honored and pleased to receive this Pax Christi Award. In my seminary days, St. John's Collegeville, through its journal Worship, became a familiar name. As I was studying through the medium of French, it was helpful to have some good liturgical and spiritual reading material in English. I never expected to be here one day to receive an award. If you'll allow me, I would like to dedicate this award to the memory of a Benedictine nun, Sister Bruno Collin, of a monastery in Liège, Belgium, who was called to meet the Lord in February of last year. We took part together in a monastic exchange program in Japan. This involved living in Zen monasteries, sharing as far as was possible in the life of the monastics. That included quite a lot of sitting meditation, and that is something that you feel in the knees. It's left an indelible memory in me, and I'm not very good at it. But this experience of dialogue from within was of great personal importance to me, as it was to Sister Bruno. It was a dialogue rooted in silence and in deep respect for the values of another religious tradition. It put questions to our own Christian faith, leading us to a greater appreciation of God's love for humanity, expressed in the self-giving of Christ, made available for us in a particular way through the Eucharist. In this world, where people of different religious traditions are brought together so much more frequently, we are called to be active in dialogue, building up relations of trust and friendship. Sister Bruno, as president of Intermonastic Dialogue in Europe, was tireless in her efforts to encourage monastics to open up to their brothers and sisters of other religious traditions. And I have had the privilege of doing my own little bit, especially while working in the Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue. Yet our efforts will not bear fruit unless they are rooted in contemplation, allowing us to see the work of the Holy Spirit in the hearts of individuals, as also in the customs, rites, and traditions that shape their lives. May we be open to the Spirit of Christ, the Spirit of reconciliation and renewal, so that we may be truly instruments of the peace of Christ. Pax Christi, thank you.
On this commencement day, we celebrate achievements of teaching and learning. I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge 3 professors who today retire from long and distinguished teaching at St. John's. Professor Emerita Joan Steck, who has taught communication these last 29 years. Professor Emeritus Charles Thornbury, who has taught English for 30 years. Professor Emeritus Marty Andrews, who has taught psychology for 37 years. I invite each of these beloved members of the faculty who are in attendance to stand so that we can express our gratitude and best wishes for the future. John Henry Newman once said that a university is, according to the usual designation, an alma mater, a kind, nourishing mother, knowing her children one by one, not a foundry or a mint or a treadmill. And so let us regard the graduates of 2007, one by one, as they come forward to receive their degrees.
Will the candidates for the degrees of Master of Arts and Master of Divinity please rise? Brother Dietrich, I present the candidates for the degrees of Master of Arts and Master of Divinity who have been approved by the faculty of the university.
By virtue of the authority committed to me, I confer upon you the degrees of Master of Arts and Master of Divinity, which have been approved by the faculty of the university and for which you have been recommended. Dr. William Cahoy, Dean of the School of Theology and Seminary, please have the candidates come forward.
The degree of Master of Divinity is conferred upon Seidel M. McCabe from Mankato, Minnesota. The degree of Master of Divinity is conferred upon Douglas Mullen of the Order of St. Benedict from Collegeville, Minnesota. The degree of Master of Divinity is conferred upon Kate E. Ritger from Random Lake, Wisconsin. The degree of Master of Divinity is conferred upon Michelle Ann Rocha from St. Cloud, Minnesota. The degree of Master of Divinity is conferred upon Kevin J. Warner from Bismarck, North Dakota. The degree of Master of Divinity is conferred upon Christine A. Warlowski from Eau Claire, Wisconsin. The degree of Master of Arts in Theology with a concentration in Scripture is conferred upon Alexander Bevan of the Order of St. Benedict from London, England. The degree of Master of Arts in Theology with a concentration in Liturgy is conferred upon Mary C. Sean Maxon Crum from Glenwood, Minnesota. Now, the degree of Master of Arts in Theology with a concentration in Liturgy is conferred upon Mary Birmingham from Cocoa Beach, Florida. The degree of Master of Arts in Pastoral Ministry is conferred upon Tan Nguyen Do of the Order of the Adorers of the Holy Cross, Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. The degree of Master of Arts in Liturgical Studies is conferred upon August Leo Gothman from Bemidji, Minnesota. The degree of Master of Arts in Theology with a concentration in Systematics is conferred upon Mary Jo Sobiek of the Order of Preachers from Sauk Rapids, Minnesota. The degree of Master of Arts in Liturgical Studies is conferred upon Cody C. Unterseyer from Bismarck, North Dakota. The degree of Master of Arts in Theology with a concentration in Church History is conferred upon Joseph Andrew Witchker from Edina, Minnesota.
Will the candidates for the degrees of Bachelor of Arts and Bachelor of Science please rise? Brother Dietrich, I present the candidates for the degrees of Bachelor of Arts and Bachelor of Science who have been approved by the faculty of the University and the College of St. Benedict.
By virtue of the authority committed to me, I confer upon you the degrees of Bachelor of Arts and Bachelor of Science, which have been approved by the faculty of the University and the College of St. Benedict, and for which you have been recommended. Dean Joseph Desjardins, please have the candidates come forward.
So that we might all celebrate together, we ask that you please hold your applause until all candidates have received their degree. Thank you. Candidates for the degree of Bachelor of Arts, egregia cum laude, Thomas Victor Hartman. Candidates for the degree of Bachelor of Arts, summa cum laude, Michael Joseph Beckstrand, all college honors and distinction in peace studies and political science. Nicholas Timothy Moe. Brian Lee Blumhofer. Jeffrey Francis Brown. Corey Francis Bush. Reed Mitchell Craigmile. Cody Michael Fisher, all college honors and distinction in economics. Michael Tyler Karp, all college honors and distinction in computer science and mathematics. Joseph Michael Longo. Luke Andrew McMahon, all college honors. David Nicholas Molinar. Daniel Fellow Pease. Gabrielle Renee Schlaubach, distinction in political science. Matthew John Van Keulen. Lucas Alfred Van Louis. Justin Richard Wild. Joseph Michael Williams. Candidates for the degree of Bachelor of Arts, magna cum laude, Adam Jerome Barvels. John Charles Benson. Eric David Christensen. Ryan Randall Collins. Peter Edward Coonrod. John Anthony Corbo. Benjamin Morris Durheim, all college honors and distinction in theology. Colt Jeffrey Edeen, all college honors and distinction in biology. Jacob Joseph Hartman. Jacob Linus Hilsheim. Curtis Robert Kipka. Joseph Leighton Kosick. Gregory Leonard Lefevre. Adnan Makovich. Timothy Michael Manning. Brendan Michael McInerney. Daniel John Murray, all college honors. Benjamin Robert Passe. Philip Dolan Patti. Richard Brian Riley, all college honors and distinction in English. Jamie Joseph Steffensmeyer. Paul Evan Storm, all college honors. Thomas Roy Wenzel, all college honors. Kenrick John Williams. Candidates for the degree of Bachelor of Arts, cum laude, William Francis Blatzheim. Matthew Thomas Brossart. Daniel John Brutlog, all college honors. Michael Joseph Bertzel. John Daniel Cheesebro, all college honors. James Stephen Dahlman. Ryan Robert Fader. Nicholas James Forliddy, all college honors. Blake Richard Johnson. Scott Michael Kranz. Kyle Davin Lampa. Nicholas Augustin Lenchevsky. Michael Francis Malyard. Kevin Robert McCabe. Andrew Thomas Meyer, all college honors. Christopher R. Thomas O'Brien. James Allen Plates. Brad Elliott Schwank. Frederick Allen Stock. Andrew Eugene Tucker. Dane Richard Upgren. Candidates for the degree of Bachelor of Science, magna cum laude, Joseph Michael Dewalter. Candidates for the degree of Bachelor of Science, cum laude, Matthew Edward Mogensen. Candidates for the degree of Bachelor of Science, Leif Nathaniel Johnson, Jacob Patrick Shima, Luke Andrew Schumacher, Anthony James Swenson, Gregory James Trobeck, Andrew James Weekman. Candidates for the degree of Bachelor of Arts, Joel Michael Abel, Stephen Francis Alberts, Jeffrey Lee Amble, Timothy James Amundsen, Michael Donald Anderson, Scott Aaron Antelak, James E. Hill Areola, Christopher David Offenti, Thomas Gerald Barry, Brian James Bauk, Robert Francis Bollocky, Brent William Bowney, Jesse Charles Baxter, Ethan Tucker Bieleke McCallum, distinction in psychology. Daniel Joseph Belknap. Corey James Bemis. John Paul Benson. Ryan John Benson. Troy Matthew Bertelson. Zachary Thomas Bickus, Timothy Kevin Bjork, John William Bjorkland, Damon Edward Bonelli, Randy John Barash, Joseph Andrew Breezy, John Lamont Bryan, Brian William Broderson, John Charles Broik, Yao Yao Bu, Mark Joseph Bublitz, Andrew Scott Birkland, Brian Gerard Bushman, Nicholas Charles Busker, Jeffrey Mark Budarak, Jeffrey Philip Caldwell, Jonathan Patrick Carlson, James Roman Chambers, Joseph Hanson Chapman, Brian Chen, Samuel John Christensen, Justin Michael Clark, all college honors. Bryce David Cloutier. Michael T. Collins. Jaime Antonio Compiègne. John Kendall Compton, distinction in biology. Andrew David Conger. Michael Patrick Conrad. Matthew William Conroy. Patrick Philip Conway. Joseph Herman Conzemius. Matthew Charles Cordes. Kevin Douglas Crampton. Joseph Douglas Crowfoot. Frank Ellis David Belcito. Pradeep Manuel de Noranya. Andrew Edward Deely. Thomas Arthur Daler. Adam Michael DeMars. Eric John Den. Joshua Mark DeZurek. William John Dinter. Daniel Richard Dobby. Christopher Aiden Dolan. Rick Andrew Dold. Jeffrey Robert Dahl. Samuel Joseph Eckrich. Jacob Scott Eichten. J. Edward Eisnes. Jeffrey Allen Eifler. Jesse Michael Ellens. Nathan Joel Elson. Andrew John Elton. Jacob Dale Enger. Elliot Abbott Erickson, all college honors. Paul Michael Erickson. Justin Eric Evander. Michael Robert Evans. Eric Lee Eveland. Noah Thomas Foz. Christopher Stephen Fenice. Benjamin Alexander Ficklin. Zachary Elmer Fiedler. Ryan Derek Finke. Riley Kenneth Flanders. Brian Paul Flegel. Tudor Reese Flintham. Tyler McCrae Flory. Jeffrey Michael Flynn, all college honors. Michael Robert Foley. Simon John Fortuné. Adam James Free. Nicholas William Frost. Luke Alexander Furta. Joseph Rocco Fuschetto. Joshua Bruno Gadd. James Philip Gary Heeland. Jeffrey Michael Geis. Daniel Christopher Giancola. Timothy Omer Gibson. Philip Sheridan Giesen. Matthew Richard Ginther. Daniel Mark Glass. Sebastian Norbert Gomes. Adam Scott Gossiak. Christopher Michael Gould. Daniel Isaac Greenwood. Matthew Hector Gruber, Kyle Stalter Gouling, Stephen James Gunville, Bradley Charles Gustafson, John Herbert Hallenberg, Gabriel Lamar Hamilton, Charles Hammond, Adam Timothy Hansen, Joseph James Hansen, Christopher Charles Joseph Hardy, Benjamin James Harper, John Milbert Harrison, Patrick Michael Hassett, Casey Thomas Hogan, Brian Hunsuk Havel, William B. Hover, Luke Morris Hellier, Joshua Randall Helmbrecht, Joshua David Hendlin, Eric Molitor Hendrickson, Chad Allen Henfling, Timothy Nicholas Herbie, Carl Elliott Herman, Blake Steve Hymans, Jeffrey James Higgins, Eric Scott Hill, Brian Richard Hoban, Christopher John Hoffman, Philip Richard Hoffman, Eric David Hockenstead, Charles Richard Hollenbach, Joshua Alex Hollenhorst, Kyle Anthony Holloway, Brandon James Tyler Hoskins, Jonathan Elliott Howard, Christopher Lawrence Hoy, Andrew Albert Human, Benjamin Kelly Ivory, Jeffrey Mark Jacobs, Jonathan Christopher Gerberk, William Andrew Jimenez, Aaron Allen Johnson, Dino Jeffrey Johnson, Stephen Lynn Johnson, Thomas Edward Johnson, Kevin Patrick Carroll, Scott Thomas Carroll, J. Michael Kasner, Matthew Nicholas Keating, Alexander Ersfeld Kilty, Stephen George Kellner, Andrew George Kelzer, Philip Chester Kick, Michael Williams Keeger, Dana Thomas Kinsella, Michael Anthony Kirsch, Philip Stephen Kirsch, Taylor William Chase Kloss, Ronald Francis Klein, Brian Douglas Knoll, Samuel Matthew Cable, Alexander Kenneth Kofed, Mark Gregory Koloff, George Nicholas Constantinides, Michael Paul Karsmerl, Dushan Kusich, Jonathan Albert Kostriba, Jacob Michael Krisnick, Samuel Adam Christosek, Joshua James Kunzel, David William Lambert, Casey Allen Larson, Benjamin Thomas Lauer, Jonathan Thomas Lempola, Chase Vincent Lenz, Stephen James Lavore, Thomas Joseph Liedl, Adam Lisicic, Troy Daniel Lochner, Michael Charles Lofboom, Matthew Dean Logerin, Benjamin John Loisel, Andrew Christian Longbella, Matthew Jahan Lovegren, Daniel Lozanchich, Julian Richard Littmer, John Mary Luguema, Billy Thomas Luger, Jeffrey Thomas Lundgren, Andrew William Lyons, Kosuke Makihara, Jacob John Malone, Richard William Mann II, Kevin Edward Markland, Michael Mears Martin, Zachary David Matson, Robert Edward Matuska, Ryan Talon Maurer, Kevin Robert May, Christopher Ryan McAllister, Michael Ryan McKeever III, Jerry James McMurray, Kevin Patrick McNamara, Christian William McPherson, Joseph Michael Mielhaus, Paul Michael Menard, Nicholas Lee Menth, Douglas Edward McCardo, Lee Francis Miller, Kevin Francis Mills, Andrew Michael Mink, Brett Michael Manning, Christopher Scott Morum, Ashley Dell Morse, Jacob Simon Mullen, Mark David Murphy, Matthew Edward Murphy, Nicholas Allen Musech, Richard Peter Musk, David Andrew Knightsky, Adam Riley Nelson, Eric Mitchell Nutkins, Anthony Richard Nichols, John Maurice Nichols, Kyle Robert Nehos, Daniel Michael Nordland, William Thomas Novitsky, Eric John O'Brien, Keegan Patrick O'Hara, Neil Martin O'Loughlin, Patrick William O'Neill, Shane James O'Neill, Zachary Alexander Ogard, Matthew Daniel Omi, Christopher Jeffrey Olson, John Carl Olson, Christopher James Orcutt, Mark Franklin Osborne Jr., Jeffrey Daniel Ostrom, Jacob Richard Overman, Michael John Paisley, Ryan Joshua Palacio, Nicholas Lee Pariseau, Daniel J. Parker, Kyle Matthew Parker, Edward John Pasick, Adam James Patil, Frederick William Paul IV, Jonathan Friedrich Paul, Christopher Joel Parisho, Todd Michael Perry, Matthew Robert Peterson, Hui Ngoc Pham, Daniel Carlson Phillip, Joseph John Pokorny, Peter Polga Hekamovich, Robert Charles Parmelo, Jason Michael Prostrollo, Peter Vitold Prescotta, Matthew Leighton Quinn, Andrew David Radel, Michael Gil Ramzik, Anthony Scott Rollins, Zachary Althouse Reif, Ted O'Brien Rendall, Samuel Kennedy Ritchie, Paul James Reeland, Joseph Francis Roderick, Derek Gerard Roars, Ian George Ross, Jeffrey Paul Ross, Joshua Malley Rounds, Brandon Royce Jope, Daniel Grant Royer, Thomas James Rood, Peter Lewis Ryan, Paul Christopher Rinda, Anthony James Saig, Mark Ryan Satt, Andrew John Salk, Kyle Van Dyke Saunders, Craig Adam Schaefer, Scott Douglas Schaefer, Robert Clarence Schlenner, Matthew Joseph Schmitz, Jason Philip Schneider, Sean Robert Schoenberg. Kevin Andrew Schultz. Daniel Patrick Schumacher. Aaron Joseph Schwartz. Mark Joseph Skirto II. Matthew Justin Scroggins. Jonathan Gregory Seldat. Christopher Joseph Seeley. Matthew Thomas Sexton. Benjamin Stephen Shapiro. Kyle Stanley Shaughnessy. Dylan James Sheldon. Daniel Vincent Simonette. Morgan Alexander Skidmore. Andrew Scott Slagle. Javen Thomas Robert Smith. Mark Francis Smith. Matthew Lawrence Smith, all college honors and distinction in English. Matthew Scott Smith. Christopher Martin Sobek. Michael Andrew Sparts. Scott Thomas Specken. Seth Francher Spencer. Liam Daniel Spurl. Timothy Ronald Springer. Daniel Lee Springman. Connor Scott St. Clair. Peter Gregory Steele. Thomas Joseph Stuck. Douglas James Svensson. Joseph Leo Swecker. Michael Paul Swinarski. Stephen Eugene Sizek. Robert Eugene Serenz. Robert Stephen Zork, Jr. Dane Clifford Tigan. Paul Edgar Teltorse. Justin Christopher Theodotou. Michael Robert Thomas. Brian Raymond Thompson. Dylan Christian Thompson. Brian Christopher Tracy. Sheikh Fantamati Traore. Brian Adam Trout. Kyle Robert Triggs. Brian Maitland Tripp. Christopher Ward Trousseau, all college honors. John Joseph Turtle. Moises Marino Urbano. Ernest Vang. Matthew Stephen Varpness. Timothy Carl Verink. Daniel Barry Wiesman. Zachary Bates Walker. Justin Paul Walsh. Andrew Joseph Warmuth. Sean Michael Wasmund. Jeffrey David Webster. Michael Charles Weeks. Robert Donald Widener. Theodore Raymond Welly. Francis Charles Welsh. Tyler James Westman. Benjamin Jordan Westland. Christopher Phillips Whidden. Patrick Anthony Wicker, Jr. Andrew Mark Wydeen. Jeremy Stephen Willenbring. Blake Andrew Williams. Daniel John Willman. Justin Daniel Winker. Matthew David Woken. Jordan Matthew Wolf. Tyler James Wolf. Daniel John Young. Russell Leonard Younglau. Nicholas James Zeisel. Robert Paul Zenk. Jacob Daniel Ziegler.
And now the members of the men's ensemble will sing the alma mater and Gaudium Musigitur in arrangements by Dr. Axel Timer. Before we leave this place, let us pay tribute to the people who have smiled the deepest and now and again shed a tear these last several hours. The mothers and fathers, grandmothers and grandfathers, brothers and sisters, relatives, and beloved friends of today's graduates. Thank you for all that you have done to make this day possible, and most especially for the love and support which have brought these graduates to this time of fresh, new beginnings. And let us also express our gratitude to the faculty and staff of St. John's University and their colleagues from the College of St. Benedict who are assembled in the choir stalls behind this podium. The wisdom, dedication, and generosity of this remarkable community of educators are gifts of inestimable value, and they've made possible all that we celebrate today. Let us give them, the faculty and staff, a rousing round of applause. We are about to break out of ritual time. As we do so, let us put on the armor of light and enter anew into a world in great need of love and service, wisdom and justice. A world where the meaning of what we have celebrated will be an everlasting and ever-present source of guidance and strength. And now, before we go, we need a song and a blessing to send us on our way. Please stand.
I would ask the graduates to please bow your heads to pray for God's blessing. And I would ask all parents, friends, relatives, faculty, staff, and administration, and honored guests to extend your hands in blessing over our graduates. This is a heavy-duty three-part blessing, so I need a strong amen to each part, okay? May the God of all consolation bless you in every way and strengthen you for the journey ahead. May you always walk in God's ways, knowing what is right and good, having the grace and courage to carry it out. Amen. May God enrich you with the gifts of faith, hope, and love, so that what you do in this life brings you to the happiness of everlasting life. Amen. And may Almighty God bless you, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.